Welcome to this joint overview and scrutiny committee meeting. I am Councillor Keith Wellham and I'm chairing the meeting today. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distance from all other persons in the chamber and in the social areas. Please ensure that you wear a mask unless you are speaking or if you are unable to do so, and that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please maintain social distance at all times during the meeting and during any breaks. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please don't interrupt other speakers. If you are attending the meeting to speak and you persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. Additionally, we will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. So I'll just ask Beth to tell you all who's attending today.
Thank you, Chair. We have Simon Clifton, Chief Officer for Citizens Advice Mid Suffolk, Colleen Sweeney, Chief Officer for Sudbury and District Citizens Advice, and we have Royston Emerson, Communities Officer, Grant and Funding Practitioner. And we also have Councillor Julie Flatman, Cabinet Member for Communities in Mid Suffolk.
Thank you very much. Can I?
Sorry, Beth, can you just repeat that? It wasn't very clear, actually.
Sorry. We have Simon Clifton, the Chief Officer for Citizens Advice in Mid Suffolk, Colleen Sweeney, Chief Officer for Sudbury and District Citizens Advice, Royston Emerson, the Communities Officer, Grant and Funding Practitioner, and we have Councillor Julie Flatman, Cabinet Member for Communities in Mid Suffolk.
Thank you. Can I move to the agenda, please? Apologies for absence and substitutions, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Paulette Kenyon, Councillor Terence Carter, Councillor Catherine Grandin and Councillor Jane Gould, and Councillor John Field is substituting for Councillor Carter.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members? We have one. Councillor Muller.
Chair, yes, I am a member of the Citizens Advice Mid Suffolk Trustee Board.
Thank you very much. Are there any other? Councillor Scarf.
Citizens Advice Mid Suffolk is one of my two charities, but I don't think that inhibits my contribution to the conversation.
Thank you. We now turn to the minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of November 2021? Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? There are none. Can I have a proposer, please, that we accept the minutes? We have a proposer, Councillor Caston, seconded by Councillor Muller. The Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress on the modern.gov app.
Has everyone voted? Have they all come through?
Yep, that is 7 votes for and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much. Are there any petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme, please?
None received.
Thank you very much. Any questions by the public?
None received.
Thank you very much. Questions by councillors?
None received.
Thank you. We turn to the forthcoming decisions list. Do members have any comments on the forthcoming decisions list, please? No, there are none. Thank you. The forthcoming decisions list is for noting. So we now move on to item JOS 2120, which is the review of local citizens' advice. And so I would like to invite our two representatives from our local citizens' advice, Simon Clifton and Colleen Sweeney, to give their presentation, please.
Good morning, everybody. By way of reminder, for those who were present at our last joint scrutiny presentation, and to inform those who were not, I would like to speak briefly about who we are and what we do. As you will know, we can all face problems that seem complicated or intimidating. At Citizens Advice, we believe no one should have to face these problems without good quality independent advice. We give people the knowledge and confidence to find their way forward, whoever they are and whatever their problem. So when we say whoever you are, we do not place any limits on number of visits a client makes. We do not restrict it to any particular beneficiary group. Anyone can come and see us for advice. We do not judge people who come to us for help. And when we say whatever your problem, we give advice on an extensive range of areas, and we work with partners whenever people need further specific support or more specialist input that we do not have. What do we mean by find a way forward? We do not make decisions for our clients. We present options and empower them to act, or assist further when the client is considered to have need for more in-depth support. We match the support we give to clients' needs. So we do have clients who just need us to point them in the right direction, and we have other clients who need more support. It's a case of assessing how confident each person is and the right approach for them. Next slide, please.
So we were asked to present to the community today about how we've had to transform our service through the pandemic. So like many organisations, we've had to adapt how we've delivered our advice and support rapidly. Pre-pandemic, the majority of our clients were seen face-to-face, and with that option removed, we had to consider how we could best help clients while still ensuring that we were able to operate safely. So in Mid-Suffolk, we implemented a 5-stage plan for the delivery of advice. We were fortunate that we were able to draw on a tabletop exercise that we carried out 2 weeks before the first lockdown, which enabled us to look at our business continuity. However, even with that experience, we initially had issues in sourcing remote working equipment, which ultimately led us to develop a business model that allowed us to continue to deliver advice from our advice centre. The demographic of our workforce, particularly our volunteers, meant that we lost over 50% overnight as they were required to shield at the very time when we faced increased demand. We redeployed staff from other roles and was fortunate that the remaining volunteers not shielding increased the number of sessions that they were available. Once equipment, and in our case telephony support, became more available, we were able to utilise staff who were shielding in a remote business model to support our core services that we were providing from our advice centre. We were also early adopters of virtual advice and gained valuable experience and knowledge on what worked and what did not when we used this particular contact model. Through the pandemic, we have moved through the different stages within our plan, up and down the various levels of service provision, following the guidance in place at that time. As I'm sure everyone will realise, that is never more important than now. We operate in a COVID-secure workplace environment, and as of today, we are at stage 4, which is telephone, email, virtual advice, face-to-face by appointment, but we are not offering a drop-in advice service. The largest client contact channel is now telephone, followed by email. The pandemic has provided us with the opportunity to improve and develop our advice by these channels. A number of our volunteer advisors left our organisation during the pandemic period, but we've also had new joiners, and we're pleased to be able to report potential volunteer numbers have recently increased. What has definitely benefited our organisation was the initial decision to keep the advice centre open for staff and volunteers, as we've not had any issues with people being anxious or unwilling to return to our workplace. In Mid-Suffolk, we had hoped that in the new year, COVID would move from a pandemic to endemic, but recent events appear to have best delayed that decision. Once it's clear that COVID is being treated as endemic within society, it is our intention to move to stage 5, which is a return to pre-pandemic service model. Colleen.
Some of my presentations remain dry, so I shall continue. Sorry, I've spilt some water. Okay, so we've had a very similar setup in Sudbury. Although we did close the office during both periods of lockdown, telephones and email became the only route for contact with clients. Our staff and volunteers adapted very quickly to the new way of working, and we too became much better at delivering telephone advice. We didn't see many losses to advisor numbers in the first year, but sadly lost many as we moved into the second year and people became more despondent. I am pleased to report that we now have all our staff and most of our volunteers back in our offices, although we are going forward with a new way of working. We have realised the value of retaining a mix of home and office working for staff where roles allow. This has proven productive with regards to time management and saves desk space at a time of expansion. For our volunteers, we now understand the value of having a team working remotely, delivering telephone advice at a time when we've also realised the value of maintaining the level of telephone advice that we can now manage. We are currently investigating how we can join in with the option of digital hubs. Over the past months, we have reintroduced face-to-face interviews for those clients who need them most. These are by appointment rather than drop-in, and have opened the opportunity to those clients who had not been able to access our service for so long. I have made the decision not to close our office in respect of the government's recent guidance on working at home, if possible, but have instead given the option to staff and volunteers to do so if they feel they need to. All have decided to continue to come in. I consider us to have become even more of an essential service than we have ever been before, and this shows in our statistics. To lock down again at this point would jeopardise the massive steps that we have taken to get back to where we were before this all began. We can see the demand growing by week at present.
So this slide that we've now got up on the screen demonstrates how our service has transformed, and that's in primarily our contact channels with our clients. So it shows how in the way in which we contact our clients has changed post-March 2020. Pre-March 2020, client contacts by telephone and face-to-face were broadly similar. However, following the first lockdown, this changed dramatically as restrictions prevented people from being seen face-to-face, leading to a rapid rise in telephone advice that continues to this day. Additionally, email contacts increased post-March 2020, which in part was due to the change in our client demographic, which we found to be more digitally literate and wanting to use this channel as their primary contact. As can be seen on this chart, email contact remains the second largest after telephone, and we do not expect this trend to change, even when all guidance and restrictions are removed. The blue line on the chart represents in-person contacts, and as you will see, it's showing a gradual increase from August 2021 onwards. As Colleen said, we do continue to see clients who require face-to-face advice, and these are generally those who are vulnerable and require complex casework. client demand is something that's very, very difficult for any of us to sort of project. But this chart here shows 2020, 21 and year to date to the end of November. And the best forecast we have is that we will be seeing approximately the same number of people as we did in 2020, 2021.
These statistics in 20 to 21 and April to the end of October 21-22. There have been several changes to our client demographics. We have seen a pronounced trend of seeing more younger people. We're seeing more in their 20s and 30s and believe this is due to this client group favouring better access to phone advice and the impact that COVID has had on their lives. We tended to see fewer people in the older age groups in the pandemic year, but we're now seeing people in their 70s and 80s coming back. This is likely due to the reopening of face-to-face sessions, but could have also been impacted by a recent increase in energy advice. Another change worth mentioning is that we've seen a higher percentage of inquiries from female clients than usual. Where there's always been a pretty even split, we now have 63% of clients presenting as female. Although we have always had around 50% of our clients presenting as disabled or suffering from a long-term health condition, there has been a rise in this client group too, with over 50% now falling into this category. Next slide.
So the citizens' advice that we're very fortunate in that we are able to draw an awful lot of client data. So this is a heat map of the location of clients with a Mid-Suffolk postcode from March 2020 to April 21. The yellow areas indicate greater numbers of clients across the district, and you will see that they are mainly in the three urban settings of Stowmarket, Needham Market and Elmswell. However, the map also demonstrates that we are helping clients across the entire district, but know we have to do more to improve our accessibility. In August 2021, we opened an outreach advice service at iLibrary for one morning a week. The opening of this outreach had been delayed by the pandemic restrictions in place until that time. Prior to the pandemic, Dis and Thetford Citizens Advice had provided an outreach service at the health centre, but a decision was made to withdraw from Suffolk. Up to 10th December 2021, we have seen 30 clients at this outreach, and it's very clear that our services are needed at this location as there is a clear need. The types of issues seen have included help with housing, energy, welfare benefits, relationships and debt. We will continue to deliver this service, but outreach advice is not a low-cost delivery option. We've been working hard to develop our virtual advice contact channel. Working in partnership with Watersham Flying Station Welfare Team, we have provided a laptop for service personnel and their families to speak to us by virtual appointments. The welfare team identify those that need advice and facilitate the appointment at their offices, where the client can speak to one of our trained advisors by video conference. We also have a partnership with Needham Market Town Council and have provided a tablet device for use for local residents to contact us again via video conference. We hope in the new year that we'll be able to locate the tablet in the new library to improve accessibility. At Mid-Suffolk, we've been working closely with the district's customer operations team to co-develop virtual contact points across the district. This work is ongoing and we would hope to have more devices in place across the districts by Q1 of next year. That could not only be used by Citizens Advice, but other partners, including district officers and other statutory bodies.
As you can see from the Babergh district map, we are fully aware of the need to reopen our outreach in Hadley, and we are now in a position to do so from the 20th of January next year. The digital hub projects that have become available to Mid-Suffolk clients are of great value. We are looking at ways of joining in to allow us to make this offer available to Babergh clients too. It will ensure for us at Sudbury that we are covering our more rural areas and Shotley and Holbrook with more than just the email and telephone advice.
So this chart demonstrates client demand for universal credit. It shows the increase in the number of people claiming universal credit post-March 2020 when the first lockdown was announced. As you can see, the increase in numbers claiming were very rapid and have been sustained. The next chart will provide some more detail on why this may be. This chart relates to the Mid-Suffolk district. The yellow line shows people searching for work that spiked in May 2020 and started to go down in about April 2021. The blue line is people who are in work and still on universal credit. This went up in May, June 2020 and has stayed high. Why is this? In Mid-Suffolk, 16% of those in employment are self-employed. This is the highest of any district in Suffolk and nearly double that of the next nearest district. Legacy benefits such as working tax credits, child tax credits, housing benefit, job seekers allowance, employment support allowance and income support have a lot of these have been replaced by people having to make application for universal credit because these replace legacy benefits when people move from them to universal credit. The claimant does not always have the option to return to the legacy benefit, which might be a reason why the amount still on universal credit remains high. It also might be that some of the people who have found work are still on universal credit, or they were self-employed and their income hasn't come back to what it was before the pandemic. The purple line are for people who have no work-related requirements as they are too sick to work, and that has shown a steady upward trend. This is significant. The reasons for this could include that there are more people who are too sick to work, or that more people have moved from the employment support allowance legacy benefit onto universal credit. In May 2020, 16% had no work-related requirements. That means too sick to work. But this increased to 24% by October 21. The yellow line shows that in Mid-Suffolk in May 2020, 40% of the people who were on a universal credit were searching for work. By October 2021, the percentage searching for work had decreased to 26%, showing more people had returned to employment and were no longer claiming universal credit. The green line along the bottom are people who are too sick to work but can do some work-related activity, and as you will see, that has remained fairly steady. The issue of legacy benefits will continue to cloud the data as the 1,609 people on an employment support allowance as of May 2021, most of whom have no work-related requirements, will eventually move to universal credit. So that line is going to roughly double. We are also aware there are approximately 2,000 families on tax credits to move over as well.
So as you can see, it's a similar picture in Babergh, although the number searching for work hasn't gone down as much. In May 2020, 40% of people who were on universal credit were searching for work, and 18% had no work-related requirements. These are people who are too sick for work. By October 2021, 31% were searching for work, and 25% had no work-related requirements. There are around 1,600 people still on tax credits and 1,435 still on employment and support allowance. Next slide, please. This table shows you the total issues in each area for April to March 2019 to 20 and 20 to 21, and April to November 21 to 22. So the issues in 21 to 22 are much lower because it represents part of a year, but the percentages are what is important. Next slide, please. We had holds on action with regards to debt, and we've seen very little demand for debt advice throughout the pandemic, but as predicted, can now see a steady increase in its return. At Mid-Suffolk and Sudbury, we have taken steps to ensure that we can meet this demand by increasing our capacity. Both now have an additional full-time debt advisor as we took advantage of a one-year training funding pot from the Money and Pension Service, which allowed us to each train a new person throughout that year. Next slide, please. An immediate and steady increase in demand for employment advice has now settled down. We are seeing what is more like the usual numbers now. Next slide. We have seen a steady increase in requests for food bank and charitable support issues, with an average of 54 food bank and charitable support issues per month in 2019-20, increasing to an average of 82 in 2021 and an average of 148 so far in 21-22. Next slide, please. The use of food banks has increased dramatically during the pandemic. Often used as an economic barometer, the increased demand is clearly linked to the impact of the pandemic on individuals and families and shows no signs of decreasing. Across the entire year, we have referred over 50% more clients for a food parcel. As you will be aware, many of the food banks have reported even larger increases, which is possibly as we are not the only referral agency. Through our holistic advice model, clients requesting a food parcel will also be provided with help and support to tackle other issues, such as the claiming of rights and entitlements, debt, housing and employment, etc. In Sudbury, from June this year, we have been able to offer supermarket vouchers to our clients through government COVID hardship and household support fund grants, and will have distributed a total of £10,000 to those most in need by the end of March 22. We have distributed between £50 and £200 to clients, depending on household size. Having this practical offer has been of amazing value. Next slide.
We're often asked, what impact do we give for the money we receive? And as we're part of a national network of citizens' advice, that we have a financial modelling tool that we're able to draw on. That's only happened just quite recently. So what this chart shows is this combined figures for Sudbury and Mid Suffolk, but separately both offices have circulated our impact report to district councillors. As you can see, the economic benefit we provide for every pound invested in us demonstrates savings made to statutory authorities, our value for money, and the wider social benefits that our services provide for our communities. Our organisations rely very heavily on our volunteer workforce to help us deliver our quality advice services to communities. What this chart shows is the decline of our volunteer numbers across our organisations, which has increased the pressure on those that remain. However, we have continued to deliver advice and support to those most in need, even with this reduced capacity. As we previously said, a number of the volunteer advisors decided after shielding that they did not wish to return. Recruiting replacements has proved very challenging during the pandemic, where competition for volunteers was high and training new advisors very difficult to the restrictions in place. This trend was worrying, as the only other option for our organisations would be to employ paid staff to replace those volunteer hours, and the costs would be unaffordable. £118,000 per annum for Mid Suffolk and £103,500 for Sudbury and District. However, at this point I would stress that volunteers are not a free resource, but they're a lower cost resource than using paid staff. We are undertaking targeted recruitment campaigns using social media, radio interviews, media articles and local publications. We are pleased to report that we have seen an increase in numbers contacting us to inquire about volunteering and have had to increase our training resources to meet that training need. For Mid Suffolk, we have recruited 2 new trustees and are currently training 7 people to become generalist advisors. Additionally, we have 5 more expressions of interest that we are following up and hope to get them into our training programme. Sudbury have 12 new training advisors in their training programme and have recruited 3 new trustees. Delivery of training programme remains a challenge within the current and changing COVID guidance. One of the ways that we address need is through the delivery of projects that also diversify our funding streams. Unfortunately, being projects, the funding cannot be guaranteed, and the Help to Claim service for Universal Credit and debt advice funded by Money Advice Pension Service have currently just been recommissioned, and both are likely to move to a remote advice model. As the tenders are still live, we cannot say much more than that, other than that both Mid Suffolk and Sudbury will not be part of the delivery of those projects going forward, as we didn't meet the criteria. However, there is no doubt that we will still see clients who need help with welfare benefits, including Universal Credit and those who are in debt. We both have established welfare benefits advice services and are committed to providing debt advice that can be accessed locally. In Sudbury, we have been successful in securing lottery funding for debt advice for the next 3 years. In Mid Suffolk, a full-time money advisor has been recruited to work alongside our existing provision funded by core and reserves. This money advisor has also been given the added responsibility of being a housing single point of contact for the district housing team in Mid Suffolk. We are continuing looking for other opportunities to secure funding in the new year. We're working with the customer operations team at the District Council and other partners to prepare a lottery bid for the delivery of virtual advice across the districts. We have previously shared our concerns about the lack of an integrated system to support those in need across the districts. This leads to duplication and does not support proactive activities that break cycles of inequality and need. We can report that following a meeting with the new Assistant Director Health and Wellbeing, these concerns have been shared, and we have a shared ambition to work with the district councils to co-develop integrated systems of work as equal partners. So what does that mean? We have worked with the District Council to explain the benefits of the Suffolk Information Partnership Warm Handover Scheme, and both joined the scheme this year. This allows the sharing of information and personal data between statutory bodies and the charitable sector to better support clients address their issues. We are currently working with the customer operations team and housing team to share best practice and to agree some joint working arrangements that will help us provide a more integrated system for residents in need. These include referrals from food banks, energy costs, budgeting and debt management. Council tax and rent arrears. We have identified that there is no single view of debt across the authorities for council tax and rent arrears. This leads to different enforcement with council tax, leading ultimately to liability orders enforced by court enforcement officers, and rent arrears normally dealt with by repayment plans where possible. However, neither part of the process has a view of the overall debt owed by the individual that leads to confusion and hardship. It is not unusual for a vulnerable person to have 30% reduction from their universal credit payments for rent, council tax or housing benefit. That's 30%, just over £300. Having raised this as an issue, the District Council teams have committed to putting a process in place that will provide a single view of debt to assist officers when they decide what the best course of action is to recover debt owed to the authorities. We accept it's not possible to implement an integrated system across all areas of work immediately. Therefore, working with the communities team, we've agreed to co-develop a system for those who contact both us and council officers to request a food parcel first. We need to better understand what the driving forces are behind the huge increase in requests for food parcels and how these might be reduced through other interventions and support.
We know that we have what has been called the perfect storm approaching. Demand for our services is set to continue increasing. Clients will have even more complex issues, and we are still managing with the impact of COVID. As above, we are increasing advisor numbers, but that takes time. We have increased specialist debt advice capacity, and we are looking at improving our reach across the districts with digital hubs and outreach. We are working smarter We've improved and increased phone advice and intend to expand both LCAs over time. Whilst our business plans include strategies to continue to diversify through project funding, we remain dependent on the core funds from our local authorities to survive, and are of course continually grateful for those too.
The services we deliver across the district support the vision and mission for communities, wellbeing, housing, economy and environment. As per the report supplied to the committee by the Corporate Manager for Communities, 3-year rolling funding agreements are in place through the revenue grant for both organisations. Speaking on behalf of Mid-Suffolk, we are pleased to report that we have been able to build networks within the council that have helped to improve communication between us. There is more for us to do, but the commitment to work in partnership to address any issues is very much appreciated. The development of integrated systems will be key to how we move forward, and we look forward to working with you to deliver a better service to those in need within our communities. That concludes our presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much to both of you. That was excellent. I think, well, I certainly have learned a lot, and it's good to have an up-to-date, certainly a review of the last year or so, to see what the added pressures have been. So I'm going to open to the committee for questions. Councillor Muller first, and then Councillor Scarf.
Yeah. Simon, is there a particular reason why there was such a sharp spike in October 21 for the food bank referrals, please?
From a Mid-Suffolk perspective, the spike has continued.
Right.
We're unsure. One of the things that we're committed to do is work with the community teams in the new year to try and bring in an integrated system for food parcels in Stowmarket in particular. If I tell you that last week we received 27 calls for help with a food parcel, which is far greater than we would have anticipated, and even had a family of 6 turn up at the door that required immediate financial aid because they had 4 fish cakes to feed themselves until this week.
Thanks, Simon.
So it's unclear as to why that is, but we do need to bring in a more integrated system so that we can try and break the cycle, because there is a need and we need to address that need.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Chair.
Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a number of questions really, perhaps directed to Simon from the Mid-Suffolk point of view, but it might be relevant to Colleen as well. You talked about the food parcel referrals to Citizens Advice and the way that Citizens Advice try and offer a holistic service, so that if they come to you for a food parcel, there's usually another issue that they have as residents. If they get referred to a food bank by another referral agency, so for example Health or Church or whatever, what happens then? Do those referral organisations then encourage them to contact Citizens Advice so they can be dealt with?
We would hope so, but we can't be sure that that would happen. And I also couldn't, neither of us could confirm if other referral agencies carried out any sort of research or investigation into the root cause. As a matter of usual practice, we see some clients when they're going through a difficult period quite regularly for a food bank voucher. But I believe there's a similar situation in with Suffolk to Sudbury. We believe it's irresponsible to continue to give those food bank vouchers and without giving the client an appointment for a completely holistic review of their whole situation, because there's often a root cause. It can be an employment issue, it can be lack of entitlement to benefits that people should be claiming. We've even found some financial abuse by carrying out those type of mandatory interviews when people want a third or further food voucher.
So in Mid-Suffolk we have a situation where we are not decision makers for the food parcel referral. We make the referral, and the primary food bank for us in use is the Stowmarket Food Bank. We are aware that there are a large number of people, other organisations that refer to the food bank. We do not have the food bank's data on who they might be. Working with the customer operations team, the Mid-Suffolk element also receive calls, as does those in Babergh, to make a referral for a food parcel for them. We've now got an agreement, some joint working practice, where that person's details, with their consent, are passed to us so that we can follow them up for another holistic provision. We are extremely keen in the new year to look at the food bank or food bank provisions, to bring in an integrated one system so that we can all look at what is going on and try and tackle it.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's the key to it, integrated system, because otherwise people are becoming dependent on food parcels when their actual underlying reasons for their need to become dependent on food parcels is not being addressed. So I think I would very much welcome that integrated system of working. I have another question. It's something that you've not referred to, either of you, in your report. As a county councillor, also a twin-hatted member, I'm aware of the Household Support Fund that was allocated to Suffolk County Council, a figure, I believe, over £5 million. I believe I'm correct in saying that both councils, Mid-Suffolk and Babergh, received an allocation from that, which I understood was about £250,000. Perhaps you can confirm that. Can I ask you, I mean, what is the process or the system involved in actually allocating these funds? Has the system been developed yet by the councils and CA working in partnership?
So the Household Support Fund was 500 million across the country, and we understand that the Suffolk element was 5.2 million. Colin alluded to it earlier that we traditionally have not been a charitable giving organisation, so we have not provided direct financial support. But during the COVID period last year, emergency funding was made available, and we decided as a network in Suffolk that we would support that, so took money from the County Council via Suffolk Community Foundation to provide financial aid to individuals and families. What's happened under this Household Support Fund is that across Suffolk, £250,000 has been provided for charitable organisations to provide direct charitable aid, and Sudbury and Mid-Suffolk are part of that process. One of the things that we can't provide aid on is rent or housing costs. It is our understanding that the District Council and Ipswich Borough Council received £250,000 from the County Council to provide support to people who were presenting with issues in housing, particularly rent arrears. I believe at the moment there is, from two district councils' perspectives here from the housing team, there is a statement on the website regarding how people can claim that additional support. I think that the process is still being worked up. I'm aware that customer operations team are going to be part of that process, so we will make the assumption that the customer operations team will probably take those initial calls. There will be some form of application, and I would like to think that we moved on quite quickly, because we do have a significant number of people in crisis now. The other underlying fact that every single bit of funding that we receive currently from central government via whatever route it gets to us always comes with a time scale, and this particular one is that all funding has to be spent by the 31st of March 2022, which brings its own issues.
Scarf and then Councillor Barrett.
It's really a supplementary question, Chair. I wonder, perhaps we've got the portfolio holder from Mid-Suffolk here. Obviously, because of the timescale, I'm a little concerned that we might not actually spend that money that we've received to help people in desperate need. What steps are we taking? Because it sounds like the process isn't in place at the moment, and March is not a very long deadline away. What steps are we taking, as you're the Mid-Suffolk portfolio holder, in order to ensure that we actually allocate that funding to those most in need.
It's me. Thank you, Councillor Scarf. I myself don't have anything to do with customer service and calls, so I will have to take that back to the leader, who is portfolio holder for customer service, and find out exactly what we have there. And if Royston knows any more than I do, please step in. No.
I think you'll find, Councillor, that the actual money's been allocated to the housing, so it'll be the housing cabinet.
Oh, okay.
So it's housing that have been given the funding. Hope that's it.
No, I'm very sorry. I deal with the internal funding schemes for the district council, so no, I'm not involved in that scheme. But as we said, if there is I can look into it and see what I can report back to this body if you want me to. Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think this is probably something we're going to have to bring up when we're looking at resolutions. Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Just two quick questions, and then I'll go into a longer sort of question. You're based in Sudbury, which is on the Essex border. You must have clients from Essex. Do you access funds from Essex?
No, we don't. We get nothing from any other local authority in Sudbury and District LCA. We do see clients from Essex, from Colchester, Halstead, and in particular because the Colchester LCA has now taken a real downturn and have found themselves in a dreadful situation with regards to losing local authority funding and practically closed down, from what I can make out of it. But there is a bit of a two-way street that goes on with cross-border clients, because we might see some from Essex, Ipswich may see some of ours, we may see some from theirs. You know, it swings and roundabouts really. So we don't turn people away because they come outside of our district.
No,
but it does all work out in the mix. Right. We may have somebody that works in Sudbury but lives in mid-Suffolk, so they may come to us to see us when they're during their lunch break or something, and vice versa.
Okay.
But no, we don't get any funding from anybody else.
Yeah.
We're very keen not to postcode. So some other offices, not in our locality, will postcode, so they will only see people that are within their own postcode area. But as Colleen says, that when we look at our data, by not postcoding, it is an even share. We do have, so in Mid-Suffolk we may see people from Ipswich, but Ipswich sees just as many people from Mid-Suffolk. The same will apply with Braintree, Colchester.
As long as Essex provides some services to Suffolk residents, I guess, then that evens out.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. On the slides you showed us primarily about universal credit beneficiaries. Is that stat your clients who are on universal credit? Yeah. Solely, it doesn't reflect other clients.
Also, did you take the stats from Suffolk?
Those stats are from the DWP.
Right, I wasn't quite sure.
Simon's colleague got the statistics together for us.
Right.
So
Yeah, those DWP stats.
Yeah, and well, so I wanted to just ask you about the food bank referrals. Councillor Scarf just mentioned something about creating dependency, and I'm concerned about that as we go forward, and the growing nature of the availability of food banks, and as you've said in part of your presentation, you've talked about not providing the solution, the decision to clients, but allowing them to make their own decisions, which is, you know, part of your sort of statement. I think the same applies to food banks, rather than just here's some food for this week, but you know, they'll be back next week, and that doesn't change. And it's hard to see how that is going to change if that is just what's provided. Is there any attempt to educate, to provide decision, menu advice?
We do give budgeting advice, sometimes known as financial capability. So pretty much every client we see, obviously when it's completely inappropriate, it doesn't happen, but as a norm, clients are offered benefit checks and budgeting advice where need be, in particular when they are seeing us with regards to debt issues. So we will have somebody who goes through all of the incomings, outgoings, and talks about where there might be savings made. At the moment, I'm just starting an outreach in the Phoenix Centre in Great Cornard, waiting for the play and stay groups to come back so that we can make more use of that. So we see then very young families usually that are perhaps struggling with their incomes, and in particular my aim there is to get a service for financial capability to that client group, but take it out there where they are, sessions where there's a group and run some training sessions. But I'm sure Simon gives...
We share your concerns.
Yeah.
It's the best way of describing it. We're dealing with multiple different food banks who have multiple different rules. So in the top northwest part of Mid-Suffolk, we will be dealing with Waveney. Waveney's a Trussell Trust organisation, and it's three food parcels. That's what people are allowed in 1 year, 3 food parcels. In Stowmarket, we're not the decision maker. It's a church-run food bank. In Walsall and Willows, there's a parish council one. We're not the decision maker. We need one integrated system where we can look at what is actually happening and what is that need and how do we address that need. And some of that need could well be, as hard as it is to say, perhaps there still is a need for food banks. Because the example I gave where the family of 6 turned up at our door with 4 fish cakes, right? With the best will in the world, go and say, let's sit down and do your budget, and that's not what they need there and then. But how did they get to the position where they've got 4 fish cakes? And that's the sort of thing that we want this one integrated system to start looking at. But we do share your concerns, and we hope that people will work with us, all the other organisations will work with us to develop this one system.
I think we do have to remember that, particularly in current times, regardless of any delving into what's causing the situation or financial capability training, that people are in just such dreadful situations for no cause of their own, and it's an impact of all of the things we talked about. Perfect storm, drops in universal credit, increased energy costs, increased petrol costs if they're having to commute to work, increases in everything that you can think of lately, isn't there? And income going down, people are losing jobs and maybe having to go into lesser paid jobs. But a lot of the people that we see who need food bank vouchers are people who are working. They're families of households in work.
Unfortunately, it can create more health inequalities, I think, if they're relying on tinned foods and dry goods and so on.
There's all sorts of implications.
Councillor Field. Councillor Field next, and then Councillor Caston.
Thank you. Couple of points. One, you said you didn't understand the spike in sort of October in need. I just wondered how that stacked up with the end of the furlough scheme, which I can't remember the date of. It's not a trick question.
I think it was around about then, wasn't it? Yeah, that was what popped to mind.
So that's possibly the cause of it. If you take lots of money away from people, they're likely to finish up in trouble, I guess. But the real issue was about, you're talking about an integrated system for food banks and things. I'm fairly well aware that I think it's Find who operate out of my ward, really. I think a reasonably large operation, have considerable concern about working too closely in combination with some of the other banks, really on sort of ethical grounds or whatever, that some of these forgive me if I sort of say that the possibility is something like a church-based organisation will prefer people from Christian church, and if you happen to be from some other faith, perhaps you don't get such a sympathetic treatment. So I wondered how you're going to tackle that issue, because it's that and also the data protection issues of passing information from organisation to organisation is something which you do have to be careful.
So in Mid-Suffolk, Stowmarket Food Bank is one. Stowmarket Food Bank is a church organisation. It doesn't define who it supports through religion. In fact, quite the opposite is our experience of that particular food bank. There are a lot of food banks around, and as I said earlier, lots have different ideas as to what support is required. Regarding data protection, we have data sharing agreements with food banks, so we are able to share those data. We will share it by the legal basis of consent, because quite clearly if someone's come to us to ask for a food parcel, we need to share that, otherwise they're not going to get the food parcel. Some of the spike in October is going to be the removal of the £20 uplift on universal credit, somewhat replaced by those who were in work on universal credit in December, where the taper of the amount you can earn replaced that £20, but did nothing for those that aren't earning. And on the chart we showed you earlier, which showed that those who are unable to work because they are too sick is showing a steady increase. Those people would have lost a £20 uplift because they're not in work and cannot take advantage of the taper. The integrated system, like it or not, I would really like everything to be integrated tomorrow. But I have to accept that we're not in that position. So we're going to look at the food banks in the first instance to see, because the food banks, a lot of things draw from the food banks. So there's so much holistic support that we can give from the food bank. So in Stowmarket, for instance, we're in receipt of some energy funding. So everybody that makes a food parcel request to us is referred for energy advice. And as part of that, the conversation starts on energy advice, and then lots of other different issues will come out from that. I really have got a lot of hope that when we report to you next year, that we'll be able to report a far more positive system for food banks within the district.
Councillor Caston and then Councillor McLaren, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask about the kind of structure of this network, how closely the bureaus work with each other, because what we've got is lots of different levels of funding in different bureaus. Do we, how much pooling, or if any, of resources, funding and services goes on in between bureaus? And is it ever the case that especially with telephone advice, that one bureau will refer to another bureau because they've got more specialisation or more resource to deal with the inquiry?
Okay, so we're independent local citizens advice, and we do work differently in some respects, and as you've pointed out, we have different levels of income. We also have varied projects. I might have something at Sudbury that Simon doesn't have, and vice versa. We do work very closely together. We work closely together in looking at anything that we can do jointly with regards to diversifying and project work, and also with regards to sharing of skills, sharing of supporting each other. For example, I've had a situation recently where I was very short of what we call session supervisors, and Simon was able to allow some of the hours that he's worked for him to come over to Sudbury and work for me. Other than that, we're not really sharing. There wouldn't be much need to refer clients, because the clients would get the same service from each LCA. But I can't think of anything to add to that really, Simon, can you?
So we currently have 7 citizens' advices across Suffolk, all independent charities and independent trustee boards. You'll be aware that East Suffolk Council did a piece of work with the 3 citizens' advices in East Suffolk, and our understanding is that they will be proceeding to merge, which makes very good sense, bearing in mind that that is now one council. We, as Colin says, we will share resources as is appropriate, so we have provided some supervision support to Colin, all right, to ensure that that continued. We have both undertaken to send trainee generalist advisors on a course provided by Suffolk West Citizens Advice, because they had a better training provision at that particular time. We meet up as citizens advisors across Suffolk to discuss opportunities. 2 sister organisations are still providing the Suffolk Advice and Support Service telephone advice service. As we are one network, we work through a CRM system called Casebook, and what that allows is that if somebody in another office takes a call and that office isn't the most appropriate person to answer that call, then we will be tasked through that Casebook system. And a prime example of that would be that I would not necessarily know what charitable support Sudbury and District could provide for somebody in that district, in Babergh District, and vice versa. Colin would not know what was available in Mid-Suffolk. So, and charitable support is something we're being asked for all the time. And so that's something that we would task back and a local office then would deal with. What we do is, although it does look that we're quite fragmented, we don't work fragmented. You know, we don't work fragmented. And we will do everything we can, won't we, going forward for every opportunity. So in the new year, you know, Colin's going to come on with the virtual advice. We're really, really keen to try and get virtual advice across both districts, so that there is not a hub as such, because that implies a building, but a device. You know, we want to work with the parish councils. Can you hold a device? Can you help the person get on to that device and have a virtual conference with somebody that needs it? Does it need to be citizens' advice? Could it be healthcare? Could it be the housing team? That's what we want to, and that will be a joint bid to the lottery to try and fund that. So we're doing all we can. We're fully aware that, particularly at county level, that view is not always thought that we are doing all we can, but locally I can assure you we are. I would just also add that I think that during this particular 2-year period, the benefit of us being in our locality has been why we have succeeded in what we've delivered.
Yeah, it's local.
Because it's been local and we've understood the local need. And that's not always the case across larger organisations.
Sorry, could I just, oh, I'm still on. How regularly does that occur where, say, Mid-Suffolk would send resources to Sudbury? Is that a regular thing, or is that a rare occurrence?
It's an occasion, just when there was need. It was because of a particular situation where I had several people leave at the same time. One of the fallouts from the pandemic, where people decided that they wanted to give up jobs. So I had several people in the same role leaving at the same time. So it put us in a bit of a spot, and that's when we were able to go and get some of that sort of supervision help from another LCA. And Simon had the capacity. In addition to that, I also outsourced my need for debt supervision to Ipswich LCA. So I share one of their specialist debt supervisors, and some of the hours that he works are for Sudbury. So we do a lot of sharing. It's as need be. We're always there. We call out to each other when we need. It's more in a situation where something comes up and we need a bit of help, a bit of support from another LCA.
For instance, so Colin's been successful recently in getting a lottery bid. You know, we in Mid-Suffolk, we've not ever been successful in getting a lottery funding. You know, we'll work with Colin as a particular individual that has that responsibility. I have an individual that has a similar responsibility. They'll work together. They'll develop the bid together. So it's about sharing that knowledge and that experience. And although it might not seem it all the time, we are actually getting a bit better at it. It doesn't always look like it. I do appreciate that, but we are getting better at it. And the beauty of us having that network was when Colleen had this situation, which was instant, was it not?
It was
pretty instant. All right. We had the capacity and the capability to be able to support a neighbouring office that meant that the residents didn't see any impact at all.
Had those supervisors been shared around as a whole, then they'd have gone and...
But the impact of losing those would have been great.
But,
yes.
Yeah. It might be worth mentioning the touchdown or touchstone report that East...
Touchstone.
My board, trustee board, spent a lot of time looking at that, researching it and making comparisons to find that for the East Coast 3 LCA, it made perfect sense for a merger, but for Sudbury, there were no gains, there were only losses. But there was an extensive piece of work carried out to establish that information using what was a very useful report.
Well, I can assure you, both trustee boards, they do talk to each other. The chairs talk to each other, and we are doing an awful lot more strategic planning as trustee boards now to see where we're going to be, where we want to be in the future, and that can only come from greater collaboration.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. I was very interested in your comment about the telephone services increasing in the contacts and the reduction in the email contacts. So do we assume from that that the people that normally emailed had referred to the telephone system?
The increase to telephones has been, the obvious reason is that that's the main route that people have to get through to us with face-to-face drop-in and appointment sessions closing down. It's more the loss of face-to-face services that's increased the need for telephone advice.
Okay.
And the point about telephone advice is that there are some positives, strangely, I think, as we've all realised that have come out of this whole situation. And for us, it's definitely been our improved use of technology and our improved use of telephone advice and upskilling people. Whereas if it got a little bit complicated, an advisor would say, oh, come in and see somebody. They've had to deal with it on the phone, and we've got a lot better at it. And so we've realised that for a lot of clients, they prefer that. They'd rather that than come and sit in the waiting room, be it an appointment or a drop-in session. And this is where we've picked up younger age groups too, because that's their preference usually. Particularly people who are perhaps of working age, who are working during a coffee break or a lunch break, can give us a call rather than come and visit us. But we are finding that the preference for telephone advice has increased on the part of clients' part. Emails, I don't think there's been such a dramatic... Have you had a big drop in emails? We never had a massive demand by email anyway, so I don't know that that's changed too much.
Emails at Mid-Suffolk have certainly increased. We have a contact form on our website that allows all the appropriate data protection questions to be asked.
Yeah, we do, but...
This is the thing, that each office caters to its locality. So in Mid-Suffolk, we definitely saw a big change in demographic. It was much younger, much more digitally literate, and our usual client base at that time, because they've been given additional money through UC and they weren't being chased for other things, that client base was not coming to the fore. I can assure you it's returning. And we do have a lot of people turn up at our door, though we're not doing the drop-ins. But the things with phone, the phones is a far more efficient way of us dealing with clients. And then when we identify someone who is particularly vulnerable or who has a very complex casework, then they will come in for appointments.
There will always be a need for face-to-face advice, and sadly, the real losers in the whole situation with regards to our client groups of those who haven't been able to access help from us at all because they haven't been able to actually come in and see somebody. So we're pleased that we've got that back in place now.
I was going to make a comment because it actually reflects when people are in need, they actually like to speak to somebody. Rather, I think it's a lesson for councils as well, that people in need are really not going to go online. They want to speak with somebody, so I think that's very commendable that the telephone service was being used. Can I ask about the debt advisor, Colleen? Is that the only one you've got at the moment?
We have a part-time 2 days per week debt advisor, and in addition we now have somebody full-time who we've spent the past year training to become a debt advisor. So
Yeah,
we've
because
now got the two,
yeah.
one part full-time and 1 2 day per week.
It's a
7 days
very
a week.
skilled job, actually.
It's very specialist.
I
yes.
worked with IHAG as a volunteer.
Okay, yeah, so you've got an idea of
I didn't achieve the advisor level, but it is very complex and very skilled, and I'm pleased that you've managed to appoint that. But presumably that person will be spread around a bit.
The full-time person?
Yeah.
They'll be working with Sudbury,
Okay.
and they will be having a sort of split of telephone advice, and the training that the person's undertaken has been to really get them upskilled on telephone advice, and also face-to-face where need be. So similar to our general advice services, saving the face-to-face for those clients that really need it. And the reasoning behind it is that we know that the demand for debt advice is just going to rocket as things all open. They are opening up, and we are seeing the steady increase already. And so that we're in the best position we can to meet demand with what we did have, one part-time person and now a full-time. In fact, nationally, the funding pot that I referred to in my presentation that we both took advantage of, it was a national plan to train, I think it was something like 100 people with citizens' advice throughout the country, so that this time now, a year on, there were 100, there were an army of debt advisors all ready and waiting to manage the estimated wave of debt demand that we're going to see. So,
Thank you. I've just got one last question. As a ward member that works on the Shotley Peninsula, I really need to ask the question about citizens' advice east of I welcome the fact that Hadley are going to recommence.
yeah.
But that leaves an awful lot of people without any service at all. So do you think that the majority of, say, my residents will go into Ipswich?
What I'm hoping is that we're going to cover that need better with the new digital project that we've been talking about today. It's always been the hope to cover that area better from Sudbury, and we were just getting there when it all hit. I don't know if you remember, any of you, but we were in GP surgeries with outreach projects, and we were into social prescribing. We were really, getting a foothold there. And of course, when the surgeries closed down, that whole project just went with it, really. There was no future for it once it was clear that it was going on for as long as it was. So we're looking at getting back in that situation. And of course, Holbrook and Shotley were on the list of surgeries we were moving into. But at the moment, we are looking at the digital access to provide more than telephone and email advice.
I'm sure we'd welcome that.
Yeah. No, we're looking at it. We were nearly there, and
Okay.
and it all went wrong.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one question I think I have, but it's not for the officers from CA. It's for potentially Mr. Emerson over there. Just to give you notice that I've got one question before we lose the chance to do that.
Okay. Anybody else, Councillor Barrett and Councillor Field, with questions for the two officers? Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's just very clear that you provided a really good service to residents in the last sort of very difficult period and adapted well to what's going on. I just wondered if you could tell us approximate waiting times that people generally, when they first contact you, how long do they have to wait?
I'll speak for Sudbury and then I'm sure Simon can answer the same question because again there'll be similarities but differences. For us, currently, we are answering, people are leaving a message on the telephone and they're being called back in the same day. And similarly with emails, they're being responded to in the same day. If it's discovered that they need an appointment, they will be seen that week usually. Because as I say, the appointments are being really sort of, discretion's being used as to who needs them most. So we're getting people that really need them into those appointments. If we really are overwhelmed, which I have to say over the last couple of weeks it has felt a bit overwhelming, then there may be one or two people that are leaving messages on the phone asked to ring advice line, which is the national helpline, but generally it is an advisor from our LCA that gets back to them. We have our own local telephone number in Sudbury, which is quite unique, and we're determined to keep that, and it just makes it easier for us to know that we're there for the Babergh residents.
So in Mid-Suffolk, our model is slightly different in that we don't have a facility for people to leave a message. We answer the phone as it comes in. Our average call for first call answering is 83%, and we know from our data that a lot of people that call us back we do answer that day. As Colin said, we try and now do everything through the first contact, which is the telephone, if that can't be done. In our particular case, debt, the first call from debt will be within the week at the present time, although that may increase when we start seeing larger numbers. Welfare benefits, generally, that again will be within the week or the week after, but we have to prioritise those who have got mandatory reconsiderations that require a quicker response to that. Colleen isn't that unique because we've got two local telephone numbers as well. So we don't partake in the national advice line. We answer our own calls. So generally speaking, it is not that long. Email response is the same day. Also, we mentioned earlier in our presentation about the Suffolk Information Partnership, which is a warm handover scheme. That's another email system that comes in to us, so we receive an awful lot of referrals like that. They'll be dealt with primarily that day. As Colleen says though, I mean, November for us was much, much busier than October, and December doesn't look like it being less busier than November. So, but hopefully, you know, but if as members here, if you find that we are not, you know, delivering what we need to do because people aren't getting through to us, then please contact us, you know, and we'll investigate and see what might be going wrong or what the reason might be, you know, why that would be. But hopefully we're delivering what we need to deliver at this time.
Yeah, we're meeting our demand.
Yeah.
Just a little point there that might be worth making. If we do have to ask people to wait for a week or so to see a specialist, for example, a debt advisor, our general advisors, and I'm sure it's the same in Simon's LCA too, will look at all the emergencies and priorities whilst they're waiting for that appointment. So people aren't just sort of put off. We check what can we do right now before we get stuck into the real job.
Thank you. Were there any other? Councillor Field, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Just a bit perhaps about your virtual service. I was wondering when that's likely to be delivered. It does sound a bit of a way away. The sort of background for that question, I guess, is that it must be pretty hard dealing with complex debt issues. You know, if the client doesn't want to run up a fortune on their mobile phone, or you know, I've been dealing with people bullied by an estate management company recently, and one knows even with something that relatively simple, the number of sort of line items that you've got to understand and grasp what the relationships are in. It is far from trivial. So really virtual service sounds very useful, but when?
So we are running it in 2 locations in mid-Suffolk, and we were fortunate during the lockdown that we received funding to look at virtual advice in rural locations from the business energy part of the department, government, and that's allowed us to develop some strategies, because we did some things that didn't work and we did some things that did work. So what we've been now do is we now share our experiences with the customer operations team at the District Council, who have fully bought into the idea that virtual is another means. It's not the only means, but it's another means of contacting all of us. Unfortunately, as we've gone through the pandemic, as we're about to do something, something else has changed that's then brought in greater restrictions. So we are committed to trying to get as many virtual devices in every single parish that we can, with somebody that is willing to be responsible for it and then can help the person get on to a virtual call with us. Because the sort of devices that we've deployed allow documents to be scanned, at the meeting, so the document is scanned and is emailed straight through to the advisor. We'd really like to develop a joint booking system, so that it's not just Citizens Advice and district councils, but other statutory authorities and other charitable organisations can utilise that. But virtual advice is just one means of doing it. The problem with outreaches is that physical outreaches are very expensive to deliver and very resource heavy. But as we have found in mid-Suffolk, most definitely needed in eye. So, we keep an eye on all the, I didn't mean to be a pun there, but we do keep an eye on what's going on across all the other data across the district, and where we pick up where we've got pockets of need, that might not be appropriate for virtual, it might be appropriate for something that needs to be in person. So, again, I'm hopeful that we will be able to report to you something very positive at the meeting next year, but I'm hoping that you will hear lots of things before then of what we're doing.
Thank you. I was about to say next month or next year, but you seem to be implying next year.
I would like next month. I accept that it might take slightly longer to bring all the parties together.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I think they're linked. I think one of you said that, well, it showed on the screen that the number of people claiming universal credit, or the number of people who were claiming universal credit and came along to you, shot up in May 2020. And I think one of you said that you're expecting there to be another step up in the near future in the number of people coming for advice who are on universal credit. So that leads me to a question about when people come in to debt, do they find they quickly get into a position where they're owing money to a lot of different people? For instance, they're maxed out on their credit card, and then they realise that their next step then is perhaps to not pay their rent or to not pay their council tax. What I'm concerned about is there may be people out there who, when they get into a really difficult situation, they come to you, and by that time they're owing money in three or four different places, and they might be being pursued by one authority for one debt, another authority for another debt, or two different parts of the same authority. How do you deal with that? Are you able to deal with that? Is there anything that we can do by raising a concern that is happening, so that perhaps there can be a better system?
So it is fair to say that when people come to us for debt advice, it's not normally somebody who's just missed one payment.
No.
And it's not somebody that just has one payment missed on one thing. So when they come into our debt service, an experience report is done so that we understand fully what debt is owed, and we work out what is priority debt that needs to be dealt with there and then. We also have another tool in the toolbox, which is breathing space, which allows us to place somebody on 60 days wait before any other further enforcement action can happen. At both offices, we use that when that is
when it's useful.
When court law enforcement is at the door primarily, because it can be used by some clients as a delaying tactic when actually at the end of it it's the same result. But so we have a number of tools at our disposal. We look at the priority debt, we deal with the priority debt. Where we can, we find charitable financial aid that might assist people to clear some of that debt. And that's been the Household Support Fund and the earlier COVID Fund were very useful for that in allowing us to do that. It just gives us a little bit more manoeuvrability around dealing with the person's debt management issues. I mentioned it in the presentation about this single view of debt for the authority. So we do have a situation where council tax and housing benefit is administered by Suffolk Revenue's Partnership on behalf of both district councils. And therefore, they have a view of those debts, but the rent officers within the housing team do not have a view of the council tax debt, and vice versa, SRP do not have a view of the council rent debt. So we have had situations where somebody has been pursued for council tax debt, liability order issued at court, approached by court enforcement agents, entered into a payment plan, and then the next day contacted by council rent and put on a payment plan for owed council rent or attachments to universal credit. And what we would really, really like is one single view of debt so that the council officers can see what that person owes the authority and to work together to deal with that as one debt rather than several different debts. Work has been done on it, and I'm given to understand that the work is going to continue. There's a commitment to do so. So I'm hopeful again, Chair, that we'll be able to report to you that before the next meeting that we have, you call us back, that we have made some considerable progress in that, and we can help people who are in crisis a little bit better through debt owed to the authority.
Yes, thank you for that. But it seems that this is something that needs to move apace, doesn't it? Because if we've got this increased number of people coming onto universal credit, that could well lead to more people entering into this sort of problem. So, are you concerned that it may not move quickly enough, or are you content that it will be in place when you get this added extra number of people coming to you?
What we have done is what we can do at the moment. You know, we've raised it as a concern with the district councils and the officers, and work has been done to try and align the two bits of data. It's obviously not going to be a particularly simple task. There are issues. There are going to be data protection issues. There's going to be lots of issues, but I'm told that the council officers are working on it as we speak. And I would like to think that we will have a resolution within the first couple of months of next year. I've got nothing to suggest, Chair, that would not be happening. But the fact that it's being discussed here now, minuted, is that will be helpful.
And we have a cabinet member, albeit not for that particular area, but we have a cabinet member in the room who I'm sure could take this back to cabinet, and I would encourage, please, if you would do that. And it's not a communities or grants issue, but Royston, perhaps you can take it on to colleagues in the relevant departments. I have got one other question, and it is for our cabinet member. You may recall, Councillor Flatman, that we met on the 15th of February 2021, this joint overview and scrutiny committee, and one of the resolutions was as follows: that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee confirm the previous resolution made at the last review that the 3-year rolling funding arrangements review be subject to indexation on an annual review basis, finances permitting, as a measure of importance we attach to ongoing LCA funding. Do you know whether it has been discussed or it has been agreed that there will be indexation of the grant funding?
Thank you, Chair. It was not adopted. However, the CA Mid-Suffolk has received additional funding this year from us. We redirected the funding that would normally be awarded to Thetford and District for the support they provided in Eye and surrounding areas. This is because Thetford and District did not apply for funding, so we redirected that funding to Mid-Suffolk CAB for them to extend the reach into Eye. So they have had some funding, but we have not linked it to index. And that went before Cabinet.
Thank you. Well, I think we might be debating that point as during the next little while. If there are no other questions from members, can we move on to debate? I don't know how long we're going to take the debate. We're going to take a break when we've got some draft recommendations. So if we can have our debate and come up with draft recommendations, the officers have said that they would then fine-tune these into recommendations whilst we go and have a cup of coffee or whatever. So we'll have a break of about 10 minutes then. So can I ask who would like to start the debate? Councillor Scarf. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry, you did. Yeah, I'm very sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. It's in specific on page 8 of the document. Mid-Suffolk CA and their 3-year rolling programme reveals obviously that this year they received 95,500, which included the Diss and Thetford uplift, which was one of the recommendations that we made at our last CA review. Looking to the future years of 22, 23 and 23, 24, it gives us a baseline of 86,700 and in brackets with potential addition of £8,800. Obviously that was the Diss and Thetford element. At the end of the table, it says the above table reflects the 3-year agreements in place with Mid-Suffolk and Sudbury and District CAs. Depending on outcomes of discussions with Thetford and Diss, I think that should be CA, during December this year, CA Mid-Suffolk may be awarded with an additional £8,810 for their extended work. I wonder, as the grants officer, the only person actually we can ask the question of today, could you confirm whether discussions with Diss and Thetford have taken part, have been concluded or whatever, so we've got some certainty as to the 8,800, please?
Thank you, Councillor Scarr. We haven't had any more communication with Diss and Thetford CA. I had some communication with them earlier this year to see whether they were looking to re-establish the service that would cover Eye and the surrounding areas outside of Diss that have had clients that have accessed them in the past. We haven't heard anything more from Diss and Thetford on that matter. I met with Simon a few weeks ago who said that Diss were not coming forwards, were not going to be offering a service in Suffolk. So on the basis of that discussion, yes, I will be offering the 8,000 that we had been offering to Diss and Thetford and moving it to Mid-Suffolk CA for the foreseeable.
I think that clarifies the issue, Chair. It's now quite obvious that they will, Mid-Suffolk CA will get the Diss and Thetford, or the original Diss and Thetford element, for their outreach service that they've done, and as Mr Clifton has said, they are already offering that service. So I was just concerned about the continuity of the funding for that provision. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think, Councillor Flatman, you also referred to that 8,810, and you believe that that will be put into the amount to Mid-Suffolk.
I I believe so, but we can clarify that when we know more.
Thank you. Sorry, so, yeah, are we now into debate? No more questions. So who would like to start the debate? Councillor Field.
Yes, I would say really I've heard a lot that reinforces the view that the CAB provides a very valuable service, and that the sort of integrated approach to people's issues seems of substantial value. Can't be more emphasised than the point that's been made about the SRP can't, with council tax debt, can't see rent debt within our own organisation. It seems perfectly obvious that that's something that needs to be addressed, and addressed pretty rapidly. Obviously, we have to control bad debts of our own, but ditching families in even deeper problems than they're in when they at the beginning is not a good technique, I wouldn't have thought. So I sort of applaud the work's being done, and think we really should have a recommendation that says we should sort that issue out as rapidly as is reasonably possible. And by that I mean within days and weeks, not within years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Did I see another hand? Was it Councillor? Oh, Councillor Scarf and then Councillor Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, looking at our scoping document that we had put before us on page 11, we had to sort of satisfy ourselves as a joint committee about the response from two CAs on behalf of our two councils. And I think from what we've heard this morning, we've got sufficient reassurance that both CAs are operating to the best of their abilities during this very difficult time in offering a variety of ways for our residents to access their services. So I'm very satisfied about that. I think they've answered all the areas of inquiry that we had listed within the scoping document, and the scoping document actually was very useful as a reminder to us. I think, as Councillor Field has reiterated, I think the joint way of working, the single view of debt, seems to me to be one of the biggest issues that has come out of today's presentation from the CA, and surely it must be something that we introduce at the earliest possible opportunity, because it does make things work easier. I'm very interested in the responses we got about the way that the food banks operate. I think there is another big issue there potentially, because I'm concerned that people may drop through the cracks. They may access a food bank, and the food bank literally provides that food parcel to them that week without actually exploring the possibility of the help that Citizens Advice, or indeed both authorities, can give them in terms of debt management. So I think that obviously is another issue. I'm quite concerned actually, admittedly perhaps our wording of our motion when we last reviewed CA perhaps wasn't clarified enough. That the intention, certainly from my recollection of the meeting, was that the two district councils provided an inflationary uplift, and we didn't specify whether that was CPI, RPI. We asked them to investigate a reasonable uplift. A 3-year rolling funding agreement is all very well, but if there is no inflationary uplift, then it might as well be a 3-year funding agreement without rolling, because it doesn't allow for any extra increase in costs. And there are clearly some considerable increase in costs that CA are already having to accommodate, and potentially within the next few months some very serious extra costs associated. So I would hope that the joint committee would make in no uncertain terms a recommendation to the two cabinets of the two authorities that a inflationary increase was considered as part of the rolling programme. I would also hope that the Disinfected element, now that's been cleared up, is actually built into Mid-Suffolk CAs, and that might obviously be a recommendation that obviously only Mid-Suffolk members of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee could actually consider. I think with the revenue grant funding, there is potentially an issue, because I accept that as the two authorities only receive a one-year funding arrangement from central government, there is no certainty for those two authorities as to what their arrangements financially will be in future years. But I think in terms of the revenue grant system, the overall amount that's awarded under those schemes by both councils, we ought to consider that there is an inflationary, or consideration of an inflationary increase in terms of the other revenue grants that we make as authorities. CA are substantial revenue grants that we make, but surely other organisations are in the same situation, and I think it would be helpful if all revenue grant funding moved to a 3-year rolling arrangement for all revenue grants that the councils make, and that might be something that we would consider. So I think we've learned a lot this morning, and I think it's been very valuable that CA have come to us again, and would actually thoroughly recommend that we actually have another look at CA next year, because I'd be very interested to see whether some of the recommendations that we potentially make today and some of the implications of the way that they operate their services on behalf of both our district's residents are actually able to be implemented, and how quickly they'll be able to be implemented. So I would certainly support us reviewing CA and our arrangements with CA next year.
Thank you, Councillor Scarf. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. I agree what's been said about the single view of debt, because it's important to use this feedback that we've been provided with. This is an area we can add value as a committee by recommending its immediate, implementation. Really, on the food bank, we need some sort of tie-in needed to improve the education advice, not just on budgeting, but also on the skills needed to assemble a healthy, nutritious meal on a budget. I think we need some tie-in with some of the cookery lessons that have been provided in the county to get people signed up who are accessing food banks. They seem to be the people most in need of that valuable service. So I'd like to see some recommendation about that.
Thank you. Who have I got next? Councillor McLaren. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm really, probably because I had some experience with IHAG, I'm very keen that in Babergh we perhaps improve the level of debt advice, and I am aware that we've got an amount of money here that Babergh contribute to, but the work that they've done in Sudbury this year has been amazing. But I'm still aware that sort of my end of the district is without that advice, and for me it begs the question whether we should be looking at increasing the funding for Babergh. And the debt advice especially, I know lots of people, it's come as something new, but debt advice has been integral to all these services for many years, and the pandemic has just accelerated that. But I was pleased about the new appointment, but I think we should be increasing that level of debt advice. Because it is with us, it has been with us for years, and it is so skilled, and it takes a long time to train a debt advisor. So I'm sort of considering, I'm sorry the cabinet member for Babergh is not here today, because I would have liked to have asked the question about the inflationary additions, but I want to look for some increase in the contribution from Babergh. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Caston.
Yeah, I think for me, looking at the different funding in different areas and the fairness of that was the concern with this. But obviously we're scrutinising these two bureaus, and I think they do very well. I quite often deal with residents of Brantford just enabling and sending them links to websites or speaking to next door neighbours, and this is just such an incredibly important service provided. We're here to receive sufficient assurance, and I think what I found is that the CAB are extremely effective, extremely well managed, and doing a really good job. And Mid Suffolk are definitely receiving value for money for a large amount of the funding that the CAB are receiving from them. I think Mid Suffolk is working for the classes to teach people to make the most of what they've got. I'm not sure if what Babergh's doing with that. I haven't been following, but Councillor Flatman has had several projects and been working really hard to assist with that. So I think yeah, for me, I'm very pleased with what I've heard, and I think a lot's been delivered. Thank you.
Councillor Muller.
Yes, I would like to endorse basically what Councillor Castle and Councillor Scarf said. I think it makes absolute sense that we make sure that any rent payments and council tax, where there are arrears, are, paid as one rather than sort of in two different ways. That makes total sense to me. But I'd also like to thank Simon and Colleen today for all the incredibly hard work that you've done during the actual pandemic. And as a trustee board member at Mid Suffolk, we do get regular updates from Simon. And I'd like to thank him personally for all the hard work that he and his team have done. And I would appreciate if you could pass those comments on to your team for that, Simon. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have anything else? Anything from anybody? Can I just run through my notes? This is in no particular order. And I've written down probably about 6 or 7 different potential recommendations. That we thank the LCA chief officers and their respective staff for their work. That we have been given reassurance that both CAs are operating very effectively and efficiently, and they responded well to all our lines of inquiry. That the councils take a single view of debt in respect of housing rent and council tax debts, and some words around some integration. A recommendation around food banks, that there's better integration, more sharing of information, advice on nutrition, and ask for food banks to refer clients to CAs. A recommendation to cabinets in respect of a 3-year rolling funding with inflation. We seek confirmation from Cabinet, this is a Mid Suffolk one, confirmation from Mid Suffolk Cabinet that the 8810 Thetford and Diss funding is allocated to Mid Suffolk CA. That Cabinet consider a 3-year rolling programme of grants to other receivers of revenue grants. That we review again. I've written down December 2022, but I'm going to ask the chief officers if December is the best time, because I can imagine that coming here today was not ideal. Wonder whether a different month might be any better. I'll come back to that in a second. The last one I've written down is that in Babergh, a recommendation to Babergh Cabinet that extra funding that they provide extra funding to enable the CA to make greater provision of debt advice. So if I come back to the question, is now a good time to, it is, I've got one nod, I'm getting,
Yes, it's fine.
okay,
Yeah.
so we will,
Probably 4 years a good idea.
yeah. You last presented in February. I just wondered whether a different month was better, but 12 months from now would be ideal, I think. Okay, so I've written all that lot down. Councillor Field.
I wonder whether it be appropriate to add something about acceleration of virtual links. Clearly, providing some form of hubs in the community are beneficial not only to the CAB but to other council services and perhaps other providers. And I'm well aware that the county did provide links in libraries, God knows how many years, 10 to 15 years ago, but that exercise needs moving into the current day and age, I guess. So something to say that we could get our IT people or any other appropriate group to accelerate the provision of facilities to allow video conferencing, remote hubs particularly into the CAB, but into other relevant bodies perhaps as well.
So would you include councils, health and CAs in that?
Yes, that's right. But it's just an issue of how one does it. I mean, the libraries have links, some village halls, which seem an appropriate sort of location. Some also have acceptable internet connections. Quite a few of the smaller ones do not, so there's sort of two levels of issue we need to address. One is what equipment and things is appropriate, and I think, as was mentioned, who looks after it and who provides training for people who don't know how to access such stuff. The other one is what locations are necessary, and do we need to persuade someone like, say, BT to provide free internet connections to such locations. But if we just ask for the programme to be accelerated and for there to be some focus, that would probably cover all those points. Thank you.
So this would be a recommendation to Cabinet that they seek an acceleration to this programme and presumably the funding to do it.
Funding to do it, recognising the cost reductions that it will bring.
Thank you. If there are no other suggestions for recommendations, Councillor Barrett.
Could I just say, I think when you talked about food banks, you said advice, budgeting advice, but that's got to be linked with menu planning as well. And budget implies it's broadly their whole household income, but that must be linked with planning, meal planning as well, and the referral to the cooking programmes where they're running.
Thank you for that. I had written down advice on nutrition and budgeting. I probably didn't have my teeth in the right place for the words to come out in the right order. Sorry about that. So are you happy then with advice on nutrition and budgeting and coordination of reference to CAs and appropriate just nutrition and cooking? Do you want both in there? Or? Sorry?
Free skills classes, I think, are provided.
Yep.
From time to time. So.
Between us, do we think we've probably got enough to spend 10 minutes? Oh, Councillor McLaren.
Can I just ask the question? Well, this business about food banks. I mean, it is a problem. I think nationally it's a problem. We've got lots of food banks doing lots of things. Is this a national, do you think it's a national thing, or it should be raised? Because across the country, some are good and some are better, but they do work completely set. I mean, I'm very familiar with Find in Ipswich, works very different to and I'm familiar with Trussell as well, the Trussell Trust. And it looks as if there should be a national coordination of food banks.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that one, but I think if we can sort it out in Suffolk to start off with, if we are successful in finding ways of integrating these things together.
But who would actually do that? It's all right as recommending it, but who would actually do that?
Simon, yeah.
The meeting that I had with Royston and with the corporate manager for communities 2 weeks ago, one of the integrated systems for a single system, we spoke about food banks. So it would be my assumption that will be the communities team that will be responsible to bring it together, and he'll either nod or he'll shake his head. But I think that's that, because certainly the corporate manager for communities, when we spoke, the impression I was left with that it was going to be one of the things that we were going to concentrate on, particularly with the new Assistant Director of Health and Wellbeing being very, very keen on that system, who the corporate manager for communities reports to. That's my understanding, Chair.
Is that something that we could put in our recommendation, that we will ask? I think we need to ask the cabinet member to look into it. We can't give an instruction to officers, but we can ask the appropriate cabinet member.
Yeah.
So is that something, Councillor Flatman, that you would?
Yeah. Yes, certainly. I've got a cabinet meeting today later on, so I'll bring all these points up, and Councillor Harry, I've forgotten his...
Richardson.
Yeah, Richardson. Harry Richardson should be there this afternoon, so I can bring this up, because if Nadeem, did you speak to Nadeem? If Nadeem has been talking about this, then Harry probably knows anyway, so we'll have a little chat this afternoon.
That will certainly get it raised at Mid Suffolk, but we need the same thing to be done at Babergh. So,
yes, because Chair, we don't have an equivalent of Harry on the cabinet in Babergh.
So that would be Derek, wouldn't it?
Well, Derek is the community's portfolio holder, but I know Harry does health and wellbeing, but we don't have that opposite. So that will come under Derek. But at our next communities meeting, I can bring this all up, and Derek will be there.
Well, I think from this meeting that it will go direct to the two cabinet members as a recommendation, a request that they look into this. So it doesn't matter who the named cabinet. We don't need to name a cabinet member. It will be a cabinet member who will be asked to look into this. So if we've left anything unsaid in there, then I'm sure that the officers will pick it up. Anyway, we'll come back at 11:40, at which time we may even have something on the screen to be able to have a look at. Right, we're back again, and we now have a set of recommendations which are going to be read out by Beth. The first block of recommendations is for us all to vote on. They're joint recommendations to Cabinet and others. We'll then take a vote on that. After that, there will be the recommendation in respect of the Mid-Suffolk CA, and then the Babergh one after that. So we're going to have three separate votes. First one joint, second one Mid-Suffolk, third one Babergh. And Beth is going to read out the recommendations, and then you'll see on the screen that we're voting for recommendations as read by the committee clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So the first lot of recommendations are to thank the LCA chief officers and their respective staff for the work that they have carried out in the last year, particularly during the pandemic. The committee are reassured that both LCAs are operating effectively and efficiently and responded well to all questioning from members, that the councils take a single view of debt and implement an integrated system for dealing with housing rent and council tax debt, that contact be made to food banks with a request that their clients are referred to the LCA for advice on nutrition and budgeting and cookery skill classes. Remote virtual operation capability for LCA and other bodies should be provided on an accelerated programme as a matter of urgency to defining locations, IT equipment and applications, training and connectivity. That cabinets be asked to consider the previous resolution of Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee that the 3-year rolling funding arrangement review be subject to indexation on an annual review basis, and that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee review local citizens' advice in December 2022.
Are you all content on that? Just one of those, and that's the one about the IT equipment. I think that needs to be headed up as a recommendation to Cabinet if it doesn't already say that. So with that, are you all content? We need a proposer. Councillor Caston.
I just wanted to ask the committee, is everyone content with looking at this on a yearly basis, or does anyone think that that might be an overkill for, because obviously we've got to manage our workload. I just thought I'd bring that up. I'm quite happy if no one's got any concerns to go along with that. That's the only part of that I'd worry.
Thank you, Councillor Caston. That was my concern at the start, before we started the meeting. And I've come round to thinking that there is so much that we've discussed today that we really do need them to come back for their benefit as well as for ours in 12 months' time, and they seem content to do that. Yes? Councillor Field? Sorry, Councillor... were you...
I was just going to make the point that I thought there's always value in these sort of reports. Certainly the CAB one is always pretty competent to my view. It gives you a clear view of what they're achieving and the numbers of people, the value for money. So it is, to my mind, one of the better reports that one sees. So I would have thought spending a bit of the committee's time on it is
Thank you.
Valuable.
Councillor McLaren.
Yes, I was going to support that. I mean, I was like you. I thought we were probably going to just back off from it. But in fact, having listened to that today, I think it's very relevant, and I think we should review it in a year's time.
Okay, thank you. So, are we then content to vote on that block of? Oh, sorry, we need a proposer. Councillor Scarf, seconded by Councillor Muller. Thank you very much.
The vote is now in progress and the one dot about.
It's told me I've got to log on again.
Councillor Osborne, can I have your vote verbally? Councillor Barrett, can I have your vote verbally as well? Oh. So, that's unanimous.
Thank you. So we now move on to the recommendation to Mid-Suffolk Cabinet, please. So could that now be read out, please?
The Mid-Suffolk recommendation is that Mid-Suffolk Cabinet are to confirm that funding previously allocated to Thetford and DIS LCA be allocated to Mid-Suffolk LCA.
So do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Scarf, seconded by Councillor Muller. And those who can they vote electronically?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask the Governance Officer to be a bit closer to the microphone and speak up? She speaks so quickly, I can't hear some of the words.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Field.
Could we just ask, are we instructing Mid-Suffolk Cabinet to confirm, or asking them to confirm, or?
It's a recommendation that
we recommend that Mid-Suffolk Cabinet confirm. Okay.
Yeah, happy with that? Yeah, I'm in favour. I still haven't managed to. So have you got votes from everybody now? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. That's 5 votes for, and that's unanimous.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Yes, I'm looking at the recommendation for Babergh. I know it says enable greater provision of debt advice, but it's really, for me, I have a concern about 50% of the district that hasn't got access to citizens' advice provision. Is it something we can add in there, or is it too late?
So, no, it's not too late. Would you like that to read greater provision for debt advice across the whole district?
Yes, yes, across Babergh district, yeah.
Across, yeah, it is a recommendation to Babergh Cabinet. So,
my colleagues agree with that. That's fine.
yeah, so the new word is now on the screen.
Yeah.
So, do I have a proposer then, please? Proposed by Councillor McLaren and seconded by Councillor Barrett. Thank you very much. And now the three of you can vote for or against that.
That's 3 votes for, and that's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Right, we've just got 1 or 2 other items left, and we now look at the Babergh and the Mid-Suffolk Overview and Scrutiny work plans. Does anyone have any comments, please? These work plans are for noting only. If there are no comments, no, we have none. Councillor Field.
I noticed there's a topic, land adoptions policy, up there, or there are several that have not been yet scheduled. What sort of time frames are you thinking of?
That's the Babergh one. The items not scheduled are.
I was looking on page 16.
Yeah, I was looking at 16. That's the Babergh work plan, which is almost identical to the Mid-Suffolk work plan. Yeah.
Yes, same item.
Well, the land adoptions policy, that was in the programme, that dropped out because the work hadn't progressed on the land adoptions policy. That is going to come in as soon as possible. The Stella Maris review, that's a matter to a large degree for the County Council, but as soon as there is a date fixed for that review, then we will be putting that, that will be considered for inclusion. And it could well be that what comes out of that review will feed into items such as the scrutiny of antisocial behaviour projects and policies as well. They are being looked at following the Stella Maris report. We don't have a time frame for the review of SALC. We have asked for a scrutiny of the way that we communicate with Cabinet and with Council and vice versa. That is on hold at present, pending the report back to Babergh District Council on the possibility of returning to the committee system or some other form other than the Cabinet system. So I'm not able at the minute to provide you with any details of when any of those items would be fitted into a programme. We may be in a better position when we meet as two separate overview and scrutiny committees in January to have some information on that. And also the other item is the infrastructure delivery plan, which we'll have to delay the scrutiny of that pending progress on the joint local plan. Councillor Scarl.
Well, just a general point, Chair. Obviously, part of our February meeting has been cancelled already because obviously we won't hear about the work on the infrastructure delivery plan, it now being pushed into the long grass. So it does appear to me that the February joint meeting with representatives on outside bodies, which we know at best is a really difficult one for scrutiny to deal with, because we only deal with the information that we get from the representatives on outside bodies, and quite often we don't actually get information from them. It seems to me that the February meeting is going to be a very short meeting. So I wondered if the antisocial behaviour one, because we've got consideration for it between December, where we are now, and February 2022, the only place it can actually go is February, unless that date has to move. But is there something that we could bring forward out of all of those things to actually make the February meeting a worthwhile meeting? Because I feel, if not, the February meeting in terms of representatives and outside bodies might be better to be moved to a later date and we cancel the meeting, because I can see no point in having a meeting for what will probably be a very short agenda item. One of the other things we've got is the improved access to the private rented sector, and it says that chairs are going to discuss the timing for bringing this to committee. I mean, this has been on the forward plan for some time. I mean, even if we had an information bulletin or something like that, rather than a full debate on it, perhaps that would make a February meeting more worthwhile coming to for members. Today we've only dealt with one major item, and it's probably good that we've only dealt with one major item because it took a very long time to deal with it, and quite rightly so. But I'm just concerned about the length of the meeting or the necessary need for a meeting if we don't have enough business to actually transact, and the fact that, you know, as you've mentioned, we haven't got timescales for a lot of these things that are coming forward. So I think it is a problem that the two chairs of the joint committees will have to tackle between you, and I know that you will, you know, in ensuring that we've actually got a full programme of work. Otherwise, overview and scrutiny isn't really carrying out its function.
Yes, Councillor Scuff, the other possibility is that there might be an initial report from the Task and Finish group into looking into rural transport in February, but that's by no means certain. But I think the feeling perhaps is that if we can't bring something forward and we can't have an initial report from that Task and Finish group, that perhaps we really should give consideration to not having that meeting, but to have the representatives on outside bodies added on to the March meeting, which is also a joint meeting. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. An area I'd like to add on to the list is the cost of maintenance to our tenanted properties, which has risen enormously in the lockdown, perhaps understandably. But what I'd like to sort of look at is perhaps bring it to the committee to look at the factors and to ensure that that is all consistent with the circumstances of the pandemic. Just going back to points about the infrastructure delivery plan, I think you'd said in an earlier discussion that that was about county council infrastructure. Am I right?
Well, they have an input into the infrastructure delivery plan. The infrastructure delivery plan includes all sorts of things, including improvements to railway stations, highway improvements, and new or extended schools. But of course, the money is collected through SIL, so any expenditure has to go through. I think it's through cabinet. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but for there to be expenditure on, say, a new school or a school extension, that comes before the district council's cabinet, does it not? Yeah. So the district councils have a role in that.
I'm not sure that it's an area that we can add any value to. If all we are checking is that it meets with the SIL criteria, that is very set out, very well established. Is that really something that we can provide any greater, benefit to the council by looking at?
Shall my co-chair and myself take that away and have a look to see? Tom Barker has asked for a discussion about delaying that. I think he was preparing to come to us with a report, but we could go back to him, see what there is that we might be able to influence, and if it is very little or nothing at all, then we'll come with a recommendation that we drop that one. Sorry, the first one you talked about was the cost of maintaining our properties. Would it be appropriate to have an information bulletin in the first instance on that? You rightly say that the cost has gone up. There are a number of factors involved in that. And it might be useful to have an information bulletin to explain that and perhaps to offer some, well, not exactly a prediction of how that's going to pan out in the future, but to have for the officers to have a forward look on whether that's something that will continue, whether it will level off, or indeed prices will drop back again. So would you be content if we put an information bulletin into the
Chair,
programme?
I'll bow to your knowledge of how this process might work. So if you think that the committee can look at that initially, then yes, that might be the first option to look at. So yeah.
I think it's worthwhile us having some information on it, and then on the basis of the information bulletin, we can determine whether or not there's a further piece of work to do. But without the information, I think you're quite right. It's something worth knowing about and potentially working on. If we can bring that in February, we'll have the February meeting, particularly if we can bring an initial report from the Task and Finish group. If neither of those is a possibility, then we will look to bring the representation on outside bodies to the following meeting. Councillor McLaren.
Yes, Chair. Just my suggestion of the review of SALC, would the same apply to that, because it's obviously an external body? Would an information bulletin be helpful to the committee initially?
I wonder if, because there are so many people involved in it, we might approach that via witnesses rather than an.
Okay.
I think if we were going to review SALC, there's some work for officers to do.
Okay.
But then I think we would need to hear firsthand the views of parish councils, town councils,
Right, okay.
and so on. Councillor Field.
Could I just ask what influence one might have over SALC? I mean, they're part of the National Association of Local Bodies, such bodies, aren't they? And they don't report to the district council or the county council in any particular way, although we're invited. I just wonder what we are imagining we're going to achieve.
I think the feeling, I mean, yes, I understand that, but I think the feeling was that they carry out training which there seems to be no vetting of the training that they give. They carry out some training on topics that the district council has in the past. For instance, planning training, which historically we received from planning officers, and now as parish councils we receive that from SALC or through SALC. I think we needed to be assured that the quality of the training that they give is satisfactory. Councillor McLaren.
Can I just answer Councillor Field?
Please do.
Send it to that. There seems to be some gaps, Councillor Field, and when I brought it up, I think we spoke to the monitoring officer. It was felt that if we identify gaps, it may not be SALC that has to provide it, but the district council, because there are some gaps in the system that are happening, and that was my reason for raising it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, and I think that some parish councils feel that they don't have access to the training that they need in order to be parish councillors. So I think there is a piece of work there. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Being a chairman of the Babergh group of SALC, I can assure you that all those projects that are brought forward by SALC to parish councils are for them to use, and if they choose not to use them, it's up to them, but they have a full agenda of what they can provide for them. I can assure you of that.
Thank you. Monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up the point about this sort of scrutiny of external or third-party bodies, because I think we have talked about it before, but just to make it clear that the committee can look into other authorities, they can look into other public sector or charitable sector organisations, but you have no statutory power over them. So they can choose not to engage with the process, or they might engage but then choose not to follow any recommendations that come out of the review. I think actually what you're really talking about is a look at the support that's available to parish councils and how they get advice and how they get training and how they get support for perhaps some really complex issues that parish councils do face. And I think that's less about scrutinising SALC, but looking at the bigger picture, of which SALC is a part of that support framework. So I think it's perhaps wider than just reviewing what SALC provides, but it's more about looking at the whole package of support that parish councils can access and whether that's sufficient for what they need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That does sound rational, I must admit. I was just having... South was within what was my county division and no longer is, and one was fairly familiar with what they got up to, and this distinct feeling that they believe that they do a much better job than probably certain other local authorities, like perhaps our good selves. So it's just interested to wonder where it was going. You've made that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the work plans? The work plans are for noting. So thank you very much for that. I believe we've come to the end of our agenda. So that concludes this meeting. The next Mid-Suffolk Overview and Scrutiny meeting will be on the 13th of January at 9:30, and the next Babergh Overview and Scrutiny meeting will be on the 16th of January at 9:30. Thank you.